Hi everyone, Brian here again, and this video is partly a review and walkthrough, or well, probably more of a review than a walkthrough actually, of the Aura-Soma tarot deck and the accompanying guidebook. And I'm also going to touch on the particularl oracle cards, which are also related to the Aura-Soma system. And it's also somewhat of a VR to Annika from Nobody Here, who put together a very thoughtful video earlier on talking about the Aura-Soma tarot which she had received, and she very eloquently explained why she'd got it out of curiosity, partly because she had seen videos by myself and people like Lisa from Tarot Alchemist where we had spoken fairly positively about the deck, and she was interested to know on that basis what the deck was like and what the system was like and so on. And she's got the cards, but is still somewhat ambivalent about the cards and about the system. And anyway, I just really enjoyed her video, partly because actually she spoke very much in a voice that I recognised, because she said some things that really are things that I've been thinking myself. So I wanted to say a little bit about why I got the deck and what my impressions are of it, and to talk a little bit about what some of the potential pitfalls could be of a system like this, and also where I think it might work. So this might be a little bit rambly and all over the place, but hopefully it'll be useful to those of you who are interested in Aura-Soma. What I'm also going to try to do is to explain how you could actually access and use the Aura-Soma system with tarot without necessarily having to buy either one of these decks. And we'll see how far we can get with that. So the first thing to do, let's just focus on one thing at a time. And the first thing to say is that what originally attracted me was the Aura-Soma tarot. And the reason it attracted me was that I saw this mentioned in one of Lisa from Tarot Alchemist's video. She spoke very positively about it, and I was immediately taken with the images on the cards. Which is, in a sense, is kind of strange because it's not the kind of imagery I'd normally go for. So here's what you get in the box. So it's a large box, and I've got the I got the edition that was recently re-released, if you like. It wasn't really re-released. The deck creator found a set of this edition which he was able to sell, and I snapped one up while I could, because it's the one that includes the bottle backs, but I'll explain that later. So what you get is this kind of introductory card telling you a little bit about the Aura-Soma tarot, the background to its painting, and information about the deck creators. The artist is Pamela Matthews, and Mike Booth is the chairman of Aura-Soma. And it's worth, if you're interested at all in Aura-Soma, going on YouTube and having a look. There are interviews with Mike Booth and a little bit about the history of Aura-Soma, which was created actually by a lady called Vicky Wall, who has passed away now, and it is an interesting story. But more on the Aura-Soma system in a second. So this is the style of the artwork, and we'll come on in a second to talk about the kind of setup of the deck. But I think probably the first thing I should tell you is that let me turn this over and I'll get rid of the box. There are a lot of cards, and the reason there are a lot of cards is that my deck goes up to number 114. You'll see that this isn't actually a tarot card, it's a card with an archangel on it, or archangel. I still can't say that word. I cannot say that word. Archangel, can't get it. Anyway, let's just have a look at how this is constructed, because it is kind of interesting. So if we scoot forward, and obviously in a normal tarot deck you would expect there to be 78 cards. So in this one there are actually, well, there are 79 in this first little set, so from 0 through to number 79. And the reason for that is that in the midst of all of this, if we just get to the end, you get to the universe, which is the world card, of course, and you find there's a second fool card. So we have the fool card, which is the outward journeying fool, and then the full card, which is the return, and that's card 22, and then it goes straight into the minor arcana. Now, I'm not going to do a full flip through because there are several of those online elsewhere, but this is just to give you a sense of the deck. So here you have 78 cards plus 1 because you've got 2 fools. And then what we have, rather interestingly, from cards 79 through to 99, in other words another 20 cards, we have got the Major Arcana, the Return Journey. And obviously the returning fool is already in this set, so we start with the Magician and then we get the High Priestess and so on and so forth. And that takes us up to the Universe Return. So there's 2 sets of Major Arcana cards in this deck. Set that aside. Then what we have in my deck from 100 through to 114, we have these cards which are Archangel cards. So Archangel Raguel, Cassiel, Israfel, Daniel, etc., etc. Starting off with Archangel Metatron. Now, why is this? Why are there so many cards? Well, the reason is that this tarot deck is based on the Aura-Soma system, which is a colour system, and which has, as a result, a certain number of bottles. What are bottles, I hear you say? So those of you who are aware of Aura-Soma will know what I'm about to talk about. So again, let me just move these out of the way for the time being, and we'll concentrate on this pile here. So here we have the Fool, and this relates to Aura-Soma bottle number 1, which looks like this. Here we have the Magician, which relates to, sorry, this was bottle 0. Here's bottle 1. The High Priestess, bottle 2. I'm not going to get them all in camera view, so let's move them up here. Emperor 3, and you can see that the colours are varying. They look a bit similar to start with, but they're beginning to vary, and the colours are reflected in the colours of the card. So this one we'd expect to have some orange and yellow in it, and yes, we do. Here we'd expect kind of reds, yellows, etc., and greens. So what we have is this system of bottles, and the colours in the bottles relate to the tarot cards. How are they connected? Well, the Aura-Soma system, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert in this, was created by Vicky Wall, who actually worked in cosmetics and perfumery. And she created this system, which effectively is a bottle which has got a mixture of alcohol-based liquid and oil-based liquid. And in it, and each of these sets of liquids are elixirs, crystal elixirs, plant elixirs, herbal kind of ingredients and so on, which are meant to represent different energy patterns, etc., etc. And they're combined in different ways, which she did intuitively. And she created a certain number of bottles, and over the years different bottles have been, they talk about them being birthed, so new bottles are brought into creation. And the way that people work with these bottles, you may have seen, and if you go online and Google Aura-Soma, you will see that very often the bottles are presented in a case that is backlit, and all the bottles are lined up. And the way that it works is a person who's having an Aura-Soma consultation is meant to select a bottle based on what they're intuitively drawn to in the moment. And you can select 4 base bottles, which are your kind of, a bit like your tarot life cards. They are kind of baseline foundational bottles, and then you can pick other bottles as and when you need them and when you need guidance. And the way that it works is you pick the bottle and you can actually buy the bottle, and then you can dab the mixture onto your pulse points and all this kind of stuff. Now I will say at this point, and I've mentioned this in a previous video, that I had been aware of the Aura-Soma system, at least I'd seen it, I'd seen the bottles, but I had actually always felt slightly ambivalent and even a bit sceptical about it, because I found myself thinking it looks a bit like it's the kind of thing that could be rather gimmicky. It could be designed to make people keep buying these bottles, which are not particularly cheap, and then they have different subcategories of bottles that can be used slightly differently, sprays and essences and so on. And every so often a new bottle comes along, so then of course if you want to have a full collection, you've got to buy the new bottle. So there's a part of me that was sceptical and quite cynical about it, but also another part of me that thought, well, if you are attracted to and intuitively drawn to colour, and you're interested in working with plant essences like Bach flower remedies or crystal essences or crystals and so on, then I can see why this might be attractive, because it kind of pulls them all together. So that in itself, I thought, well, I can see the appeal for some people. I was particularly interested by the way that it was relating to the tarot, and I thought, well, it's quite interesting to think that these bottles can be mapped up against the tarot system. And we already know, I think it's important to say that we already know that the tarot system in and of itself is capable of having many different systems mapped against it. They're not inherent to it. The tarot itself didn't start life as a divination system, it started life as a game. And yet over the years we've seen astrology, Kabbalah, the I Ching, Jung's psychological functions, all kinds of different psychological tools can be mapped against the tarot very successfully and very valid in a very valid way. So I must admit I did think, well, why not this system as well? If there's any value in it, why couldn't it be mapped against tarot? And that made me interested to explore more. The other thing that interested me was I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting, if you were working with a client and you wanted them to select tarot cards, and bear in mind that most of the people I work with using the tarot are coaching clients, so they're not people who are necessarily people who would naturally gravitate towards using the tarot. Very often they're people who actually can be a bit skeptical about things like that, but I'll sometimes use the tarot with their permission, of course, if they reach a point in a coaching session where rational thinking and even the kind of questions I have in my coach's toolkit to unblock some of their blockages, even when those aren't working, or when those aren't working, then it's sometimes useful to use the tarot as a system that gets beyond that kind of rational thought, because you're selecting cards randomly or you're responding to the symbols that appear. Something I sometimes do with my coaching clients is I give them a deck of cards and I ask them to select a card face up, so not to choose them randomly as we would in a normal tarot reading, but to flip through and find an image that represents how they're feeling. And for some clients this works really well, and they love doing it and they do it very successfully. However, there are some clients who are actually quite intimidated by the images and find that quite difficult. They find the face-up selection difficult. So it occurred to me, what if I was asking people to select a card to represent how they felt, but it wasn't something like an image of a person, or something that's scary like the death card, or happy like the sun card, but was a bit more abstract, was just colours, sometimes complementary colours, sometimes contrasting colours. What if I was to say to them, you want a new job, you don't know what kind of job you want. Which of these bottles, or combination of bottles or colours, would best represent how you would feel if you were successful in getting the job? It occurred to me that could be an interesting way of asking clients to choose tarot cards. And then it occurred to me that it might be interesting to do this for myself in a reading. If I can structure a tarot reading, I'm seeking guidance, I work out some questions to ask myself and construct those into a tarot reading. What if I, instead of then dealing the cards out randomly, selected cards in the way that an Aura-Soma bottle would be selected, and placed the cards in the different parts of the reading, and then turned them over and read the tarot cards that arrived as a result? So these are all just thoughts I had, and I thought, well, there might be something in this system, so let's give it a go. So I have got the deck, and I have to say, I understand that this is not a deck that is for everyone. I understand that the style of art is not for everyone, kind of despite myself, because I'm not generally attracted to tarot decks that are very kind of hyper colourful and in some ways quite whimsical in the artwork. I'm not particularly attracted to tarot decks that are all soft pink and blushing purples and so on, and there is a lot of that in this deck, but there's also some serious esoteric imagery in the deck, and you do see encoded into it Kabbalah and astrology and various other things, alchemical systems as well. So in its own right, I think actually the tarot deck is quite useful. Now, one thing to say, here are the swords, and what you find in the swords is that most of the swords are associated with a different ascended master, of course, from theosophy, that kind of theosophical thinking. So there's Maha Chohan, Sanat and Venus Kumara, and sometimes it's names that we would know even outside of philosophy, like Lao Tzu and Kuan Yin, Lady Portia, Orion and Angelica, Pallas Athena, so gods and goddess Saint Germain, the Christ, and these are all the swords. And in the book it explains that the reason the swords have got these ascended masters associated with them is that the swords are about thinking and clarity and so on, and also the Ace of Cups has got an ascended master. Now again, the cynical part of me would think, well, what's happened here is that as the bottles have grown and developed, they've associated new bottles with new beings like ascended masters or like archangels, and they of course have had to be mapped into the tarot in some way. But nonetheless, there is also something about considering, is it possible to work with these? Now, I don't usually work with angels and ascended masters and so on in my work when I'm using psycho-spiritual tools. I use the tarot, I occasionally use the I Ching, I have been known to use the runes, but working with angels and ascended masters is not something that I'm used to doing. But that's not to say that I wouldn't be open to considering how that might work. And I think where I'm at with this deck really is feeling a bit as though it's... Oh, and I've just turned the light out on us. Hang on, I'm running out of room, you see, and every time I put cards down on this light, it's very sensitive. It's one of these lights that's touch sensitive and it keeps going off. So, where was I? Yes, so I've kind of got to the point of thinking that, why not give a system like this a try? And again, going back to this principle that tarot itself did not start life as a divinatory system, but those of us who are tarot enthusiasts know how well it works. And sometimes systems do just work within themselves, even if the provenance of the system is something that we're not terribly sure about. So I'm remaining open-minded about that. Having said all that, this is an expensive way of working out whether you like the tarot and the Aura-Soma system. The Aura-Soma system itself can be expensive if you want to buy the bottles and use them and so on. It's not something I'm particularly attracted to doing, but again, if people find value in that, then more power to their arm. But it's also quite expensive to buy this deck, and this deck is now out of print. The bottle-backed deck is out of print, and what most of them have now is logo backs. I don't have any of the logo back edition. The later cards are actually just plain, so the last couple. It is expensive, and here's an interesting thing as well. I noticed that Annika's version, which is logo backed, went all the way up to card number 115, which is one later than I have. And I must admit, and this is an interesting thing to be aware of, I felt a twinge of, not jealousy exactly, but when I saw that Annika had card 115, I did have the thought, why doesn't my deck have 115, and how can I get that card? Which does say something about the way that the Aura-Soma system could hook you into wanting to complete your collection. So when a new bottle is birthed, that feeling of, I want to have that bottle, and then will there be a new card to go with it? And I'm not sure that they are going to make any more tarot cards to go with the system. So it's worth just being aware of that, because if you are the kind of person who is quite obsessive about having a complete collection, just know that this is an evolving system. Aura-Soma is an evolving system. So at some point, it is going to, your deck of cards and your guidebook, and it is a very good guidebook, I must say, because it goes into all the detail of, the different symbols that are used in each card, why the colours are used as the way they are, what the suggested meanings are when the card appears in divination. So it's, it's a good, thorough book. But the book and deck together are quite pricey, and if you are going to feel that you've got an incomplete kit after a bit of time, then it's worth being aware of that, because it might be something to consider in terms of whether you really want to invest all this money. Having said that, I'm pleased with it. I like it. I think it looks good. I think it will work well as a tarot. I'm fascinated to work with the idea of the return journey of the major arcana, etc., etc. So that's this deck. I'm just going to pull a couple of cards from it to show you something that I think is kind of interesting. Let's see if we can find one that's got slightly contrasting colours. Yeah, okay, so let's put that one back. So here are 3 bottles, and as I say, these 3 bottles are 2 layers of liquid. One is oil based, one is alcohol based, so of course they don't mix, but they do mix when you shake them up. And that's where the Farben der Engel card comes in, because what this Oracle deck is a deck in which the photographs have been taken of the shaken up bottles. So let's just have a look, see if I can find 4, 7. Okay, so let's just use these. So what the artist has done, or the creator of this deck has done, is taken the Aura-Soma bottles, given them a shake, and then used a very powerful camera to take a picture of them. And the way that these cards in isolation are meant to be used is for intuitive purposes, if you read colour, etc, etc. But here's a way of engaging with the deck. Now this deck, with the Aura-Soma system, this deck of cards is cheaper than this one. So if you want to simply be able to select Aura-Soma cards and then relate them to the tarot, you could purchase this deck. You could select the cards from this deck, and then you could go online to see which card number relates to which tarot card. That's fairly easy to do. That's one way of doing it. And the cards are in themselves really rather pretty. If you're interested in intuitive kind of colour reading, and you think colour work is something you would like to do something about, then these cards are really rather pretty, and you know, they may well be suitable for that purpose. There is another way, and that is to, well, there's two other ways. The other way that has some expense associated with it, but not too much, is to buy the Aura-Soma app. And that's the price of a paperback book, really. It's about £8.99 in UK money, and it has all of the bottles in it, and you can see the bottles and you can select them on the app, and then you can see which tarot card they relate to. So that's a cheaper way, and it has the Aura-Soma tarot images in the app as well. So if you don't have the deck and you want the deck and you want access to the images, you could do that. Another way, and an even simpler way, would be to find a website which has all of the Aura-Soma bottles listed on it, and that's again very easy to do. There are lots of them around. Select the bottles intuitively in the way that I've described, either just simply as a in the moment draw, or you could even construct a spread and then select a bottle for each position in the spread, or more than one bottle. And then what you would do is you would find, again online, which bottle relates to which tarot card, and again that's not too difficult to do. Sometimes the websites indicate that, and you could pull tarot cards from your own tarot deck, whether it's Rider-Waite-Smith or Thoth or Marseille or Creatures of the Magical Forest, or whichever one it is, and you could use those tarot cards and relate them to the bottle back. So and I'm not suggesting that this is something that everyone would want to do, but if you're fascinated by or interested in the Aura-Soma system and you want to know more about how it might work in relation to tarot, then obviously buying the deck is one option, and if you like this kind of deck, then it's probably a very good option, because it is a very beautiful deck, I think, and there is a lot of depth to it. But if you're not sure, if you really are not sure and you want to explore further without committing, and you're also concerned about the temptation of feeling that you are being drawn into a system that you're not sure about, then the other way of doing it would be to use the free resources online and your own trusty tarot deck and just experiment, see what happens. See what happens if you intuitively select these bottles and then look at your tarot cards in relation to them. You might find that you think, well, this is just not adding anything to my tarot practice, or you might find that it does add something. So that would be an option for you if you're not entirely sure about how to use the system. And I hope that helped. Just to make you aware as well, the Farben der Engel deck comes, it's German, and this translates as Angels of Light, I believe. And the author, Darsha Willing, has made an English translation of the guidebook available, and I'll see if I can remember to link that below, but it's fairly easy to obtain from her website. So if you do buy the Farben der Engel deck, which you can get on Amazon, just be aware that it doesn't have English instructions, but they are freely available online. So That's just a very brief account of my experience with Aura-Soma Tarot and the Farben der Engel deck, and I suspect I'll come back to this topic as I work with the deck more and get more of a sense of whether it is as valuable as I think it might be. But I want to thank Annika for her video, because I think it, she raised a really important point, and there is always that temptation in the community, isn't there, when we see a deck, particularly one that people we trust are raving about, to feel, oh, maybe I should have that, or am I missing something? Well, maybe we are missing something if we don't see what other people see, but maybe we're not. Maybe we're just seeing what we need to see. Not every tarot deck is for everyone. Not every system is for everyone, and not every divination system, even although we may feel they all have validity, not everyone is going to be right for us, and that's okay. That is absolutely okay. This is all about being on a journey which allows us to find what works best for us, and trusting that we'll know when we find a system that works best for us. So with that said, I wish you all the best, and I'll be back very, very soon, and I hope you're all well and are happy whatever you're doing. Take care. Bye.